Brother announced his engagement at Sunday dinner, and my mother cried happy tears for 20 minutes straight. When she finally composed herself, she looked around the table and said, "This is what family is supposed to feel like." She was looking at everyone except me. I'd driven 4 hours for that dinner. I left at 6 in the morning, hit construction on the 78, and arrived with a tension headache already building behind my left eye. I'd brought flowers, white ranunculus, her favorite, and a bottle of wine I'd spent more than I should have on. I set both on the counter when I arrived. She put the wine in the rack without a word and moved the flowers to the mudroom because, she said, the pollen would bother her sinuses. That was the tone of the whole evening. My brother Theo and his fiancée Priya were glowing. Priya is lovely. She's warm and funny, and she kept touching Theo's arm the way people do when they're genuinely happy, not just performing it. I liked her immediately. I still do. None of what happened was about her. The dinner table was loud in the way my family does. Loud, everyone talking over each other, my dad refilling glasses, my aunt repeating the same story about her cruise she'd told at the last 3 gatherings. My brother Theo sat at the head of the table, which was new, and my mother hovered around him the way she always did, like he was a plant she'd grown and was very proud of. Priya's brother Marcus was there too. He'd driven up from Philadelphia. He was polite and a little quiet, still figuring out the family dynamic. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself for most of my adult life. At some point, the conversation turned to careers. Priya is a hospital administrator. Marcus is an engineer. My brother is in commercial real estate, which my parents have considered a calling since the day he got his license. My dad clapped him on the shoulder and said, "This kid's going to own half the county before he's 50, and everyone laughed. Then Marcus looked at me. He had the kind of face that asks questions honestly, not to fill space. "What about you?" he said. "What do you do?" I opened my mouth. My mother got there first. "Oh, Leigh works with textiles," she said in the exact tone people use to describe a phase a teenager is going through. She picked up her wine glass. "It's more of a passion project, really. She's always been artistic." She said artistic the way some people say troubled. "It's actually I started. "She restores historic textiles," my aunt offered helpfully. "For like museums and stuff? Or something like that." She made a vague gesture with her fork. I never fully understood it. "That's fascinating," Marcus said, still looking at me. "It's a niche thing," my dad said, nodding slowly, the way he does when he's trying to be diplomatic. "Not a lot of money in preservation work, but she's passionate. That matters." Passionate. The word they use when they mean foolish, but we love you anyway. I felt the familiar heat move up the back of my neck. I'd been doing this work for 11 years. I had a master's degree in textile conservation from one of 4 programs in the country that even offered it. I had restored pieces for the Smithsonian, for 3 presidential libraries, for private collectors whose names you would recognize. I had a waiting list. I charged more per project than my brother made in commission on a mid-sized commercial sale. None of them knew any of that. Not because I'd hidden it exactly, but because no one had ever asked. I picked up my fork and said nothing. Across the table, Marcus was still watching me with that quiet, careful expression. He didn't look convinced by my mother's summary. But the conversation moved on, the way it always did. Back to Theo, back to the engagement, back to the world my family understood. I drove home the same night. I told them I had an early deadline, which was true. I turned the radio off an hour into the drive and let the silence sit with me. The headache had moved from behind my eye to the base of my skull, and I cataloged, as I sometimes did on long drives home from my family, exactly what had happened. My mother had told a stranger that my career was a passion project. My father had said there wasn't money in it. My aunt had said she'd never fully understood it, as though she'd tried. No one had corrected any of it. I'd been the quiet one for 32 years. I had a reputation in my family for being sensitive, serious, a little withdrawn. Theo was the one who filled a room. I was the one who read in the corner at Christmas. They had decided somewhere along the way that quiet meant small. That still meant stuck. I thought about that the whole drive home. I thought about it for the next 2 days. working in my studio with cotton gloves and a lighted magnifying glass, stabilizing a section of 19th century silk damask that a museum in Boston had shipped to me in a climate-controlled crate the size of a small car. The piece was worth more than my parents' house. My handling of it was non-negotiable. They'd reached out to me specifically after years of my name circulating in the right circles. On the third day, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of documentation photography. The light was perfect, and I'd learned that my mother's calls rarely contained anything I needed urgently. But I picked up. "I'm glad I caught you," she said, which was how she started calls when she needed something. "Your father and I have been talking. You know how Theo is planning to expand into historic property sales? He's been eyeing this building downtown, the Whitmore building. It's been on the market for a while, zoning issues, but he thinks he can work around it." I knew the Whitmore building. Everyone in the county who cared about architectural history knew it. It was a 1910 Beaux-Arts commercial building, one of the last of its kind in the region, and it had been slowly deteriorating for years while various developers argued over its bones. "We were wondering," my mother continued, "if you might be willing to co-sign a small business loan with Theo, just to help him get the financing in order. He's got most of it, but the bank wants a stronger co-signer." Something about debt to income. I set down my documentation camera very carefully. "How much?" I asked. 300,000. It's really just a formality, honey. Theo's going to flip it, renovate, and sell, and you'd be paid back within a year. It would mean so much to him to have your support, to have the family behind him." There it was, the family behind him. As though I had been standing apart from the family by choice, rather than being perpetually arranged outside the frame of their photograph. "I can't do that, Mom," I said. The warmth left her voice the way heat leaves a room when a window opens. "Leigh, it's your brother. It's his future. Don't you want to see him succeed? I can't co-sign a loan I'm not involved in." "You're being dramatic." "It's a signature. A signature that makes me legally responsible for $300,000. She exhaled sharply. "I don't understand why everything has to be so complicated with you. This is what family does. Theo would do it for you in a heartbeat." She paused, "Though God knows you've never asked." She said it softly, but she meant it to land. It did. I hung up after another minute of going in circles. I stood in my studio surrounded by the careful, patient work of a career I'd built alone, in the silence, without any of them watching. And I felt the thing I've been feeling my whole life. That low, grinding ache of being in a family that loved you in theory and dismissed you in practice. And then I felt something else, something sharper. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. You have to understand what the Whitmore building meant to my brother, and what it meant to me to understand what happened next. To Theo, the Whitmore was square footage. It was a distressed asset and a transitional corridor, 3 floors of undervalued commercial space that he could gut, modernize, and move. He had a buyer in mind already, a hotel group out of Atlanta that wanted a boutique property. He'd been circling it for 8 months, spying the owner's drinks at the Chamber of Commerce, running the numbers, talking loudly at dinner parties about his vision for adaptive reuse, which in his vocabulary meant tear out the details and put in an open floor plan. To me, the Whitmore building was something else entirely. I had walked past it 100 times growing up. My grandmother used to tell me about the original terrazzo floors, the plasterwork in the lobby, the brass elevator doors that had been there since the building opened. She'd worked in it as a young woman. She cried a little when they closed it. I was 8 years old and I filed that away somewhere deep. 2 years ago, at a conference in Chicago, I had met Ellery Whitmore Haynes. She was the granddaughter of the family that had built the building in her late 70s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had watched a lot of things she loved get handled carelessly. We'd spoken for almost an hour over bad conference coffee. She told me the family trust still held partial ownership. She told me that every developer who'd come to them had wanted to strip it. She told me that what she was hoping for, what the family had been hoping for, was someone who would treat it as what it was, a piece of the city's history, not a liability to be neutralized. I had thought about her a lot since that conversation. After my mother's call, I thought about her even more. I found her contact information in the notebook I kept for exactly this kind of thing. the slow, patient accumulation of relationships in a field where relationships are everything. I composed an email carefully. I told her I was interested in the Whitmore building, not as a developer but as a conservationist. I told her what I did. I attached 3 project portfolios and a link to a piece I'd written for the Journal of the American Institute for Conservation. I sent it at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. She responded by 7 the next morning. Leigh, her email began, I've been waiting 2 years for someone to send me exactly this kind of message. Please call me at your earliest convenience. We spoke for 90 minutes. I told her my vision to purchase the Whitmore building, restore its original interior details, and operate my studio from the ground floor while converting the upper floors into artist and conservation residency spaces, the kind of living working arrangement that had sustained creative people in American cities for a century before it became impossible. I told her I wanted to partner with the local historical society to designate it properly. I told her I could move quickly. How quickly? She asked. I can have an offer and proof of funds to you within 48 hours, I said. There was a pause. Then she laughed. My lawyer is going to be very surprised, she said. He told me this call would take months. I hung up and called my own lawyer, a meticulous woman named, I'll just call her my attorney, who had handled every significant contract my business had ever signed. She was not a person who got excited easily. When I laid out what I wanted to do, there was a long pause. The Whitmore building, she said. As in, the one your brother has been pursuing? Yes, I said. Another pause. All right, she said, and I could hear the very small smile in her voice. Let's get to work. I should say here what I had not said at the dinner table because my family had not asked. I had been running my textile conservation studio for 9 years as a fully independent practice. I had 6 long-term institutional contracts, 2 of which were with federal entities. I had consulted for auction houses in New York and London. I had a waiting list for private clients that ran 18 months long. The previous year, I had cleared more income than my brother made in his best commission year. I knew because our father, who considered financial transparency a family virtue, had told me Theo's numbers over the phone one evening without apparently considering that information might travel in multiple directions. I was not rich in the way people imagine when they hear the word. I didn't own a boat. I drove a 7-year-old Subaru with a cracked side mirror I kept meaning to fix. My apartment was small and full of books and equipment and the particular organized chaos of someone who works with rare and fragile things at her kitchen table. But I had been careful, and I had been consistent, and the money I had saved and invested over a decade of working on things other people found inexplicable was real and it was substantial. The offer went in on a Friday. Cash. Full ask. No contingencies. The Whitmore Haynes Family Trust, I was told, accepted within 4 hours. My attorney called me. You own a building, she said. A piece of history, I said. Both, she said. I spent the following week in a kind of concentrated quiet, working through the logistics, walking the building with my contractor and a structural engineer I'd worked with on 2 previous projects. The terrazzo floors were intact under 40 years of carpet. The plasterwork was damaged but savable. The brass elevator doors were still there, tarnished to a deep brown but structurally sound. I stood in the lobby on a Tuesday morning with dust motes floating in the light from the original transom windows and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, which was that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My family had gone quiet after our phone call. Theo had texted once, "Hope you're good. Let me know if you change your mind," which was the closest he usually came to an apology. My mother had not called. My dad had sent a forwarded news article about something unrelated, his version of an olive branch. I invited them to brunch. I kept the message simple. I said I had some news to share and I'd love for everyone to come. I gave a date, a time, and told them I'd send the address separately. I included Theo and Priya, my parents, my aunt. I added that they should come hungry. My mother replied within minutes. Does this mean you've reconsidered? I'm glad you came around, honey. I didn't respond to that part. Sunday morning, I sent the address. My mother called 30 seconds later. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was 11 seconds long. Leigh, this is the Whitmore building. What is this? Call me. I texted back, see you at 11. Come around to the front entrance, I'll be watching for you. I set up brunch in the lobby, which sounds stranger than it looked. The space was enormous and full of morning light and smelled of old wood and plaster dust. And, from the table I'd arranged near the windows, fresh coffee and the egg strata I'd baked that morning in the building's industrial kitchen, which I'd already had cleaned and minimally outfitted. I borrowed linen napkins from a friend. I put flowers on the table, white ranunculus, her favorite, again. I was a person who tried. I heard the cars arrive. I watched from the second-floor landing as my mother got out of the passenger seat and looked up at the facade of the Whitmore building with an expression I had never seen on her face. She had seen photographs, I knew. She had heard Theo describe it. But standing in front of it seemed to be different. Even she could see what it was. Theo got out behind her. He was wearing a blazer, which meant he'd dressed for a negotiation. He stood with his hands in his pockets and looked up at the building and then looked at Priya beside him and then looked at the building again. My aunt arrived in her own car. My dad was driving. My mother walked to meet them without waiting. I came downstairs and opened the front door. "Welcome," I said. My mother looked past me into the lobby. She looked at the table with the linen and the flowers and the coffee service. She looked at the walls, the plasterwork, the transom windows, the light. "Leigh," she said, "what is this? Did the new owners hire you?" "No," I said. "Come in. Brunch is ready." I stepped back. They came in hesitantly, the way people enter a space that doesn't match their expectations. My aunt made a small sound of surprise at the lobby ceiling. My dad touched the brass elevator door with one finger like he was testing whether it was real. Theo was looking at me. "Leigh," he said slowly, "what is going on?" "I bought it," I said. The silence had a texture to it. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion first, then the beginning of something that might have been understanding, and then a kind of blankness that I recognized as the face she made when she needed a moment to recalibrate. "That's not possible," she said. "The sale closed Thursday," I said. "Would you like coffee?" "The strata is still warm. You bought this building?" Theo said it flatly, not quite a question. "Cash offer," I said. The family trust was very motivated. They'd been looking for a conservationist, not a developer. I paused. They mentioned they'd had several approaches from people hoping to do a hotel conversion. The word they used was disappointing. Theo understood what I was saying. He was in real estate. He knew how that sentence landed. My mother found her voice. "How? How did you've never." She stopped. Started again. "With what money, Leigh?" And there it was. The question she'd never thought to ask before, because she'd already decided she knew the answer. "The money I've made," I said, "over the last 9 years, doing the passion project." My aunt made a small sound. My dad sat down in one of the chairs near the table. Not dramatically, just as though his legs had made a decision independently of the rest of him. "You're serious," Priya said quietly. She was looking at me with something that might have been admiration. I liked her for it. "Completely," I said. My mother sat down. She sat down the way people do when their body is processing something their mind hasn't caught up to yet. She looked around the lobby, at the plasterwork, the floors, the windows, and I watched her see it properly, maybe for the first time. Not as the asset Theo had been circling, as what it actually was. "Mom," I said gently, "this is what I do. This is what I've been doing. You called it a passion project. It buys buildings." She didn't say anything. My brother pushed off the wall he'd been leaning against. "I've been working on this deal for 8 months," he said, and his voice was controlled but tight. "I know," I said. "You knew I wanted this building." "I did," I said. "And I'm sorry that's a hard thing to hear, but I didn't buy it to take it from you, Theo. I bought it because the people who own it needed a specific kind of buyer, and I'm that buyer. You were never going to get it. They weren't going to sell to a hotel conversion. You could have told me that. Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer, because we both knew the answer, and it wasn't flattering. My mother looked up from the table. Her face had settled into something harder. "You let us ask you for money," she said. "You let us ask you to co-sign for Theo's loan, and you said no, and then you turned around and I said no because I wasn't going to guarantee a loan for a project I thought was a mistake," I said. "I said no because I am a grown woman with my own business and my own finances and my own judgment, and I don't co-sign things I'm not involved in. I said no because no is a complete sentence. But also," I paused. "You asked me to co-sign $300,000 the same week you told a stranger that my career was a passion project, at my nephew's engagement dinner, in front of everyone." My mother blinked. "You didn't know Marcus," I said. But I saw Priya look at her brother and then look at me, and I know what she was thinking. I know because I spent my whole life watching people hear what you say about me and adjust their opinion accordingly. "You have been describing me as a nice girl who likes old things for 32 years, Mom. And then you needed something, and you called me, and suddenly I was capable enough to be worth $300,000 of legal exposure." The room was very quiet. My aunt was studying the pattern on the tablecloth very intently. My dad had his elbows on his knees and was looking at the floor. Priya reached over and put her hand on Theo's arm. My mother looked at me. Her voice, when she found it, was smaller than I was used to. "I didn't think of it that way." "I know," I said. "That's the part that's hard to explain to you. It's not that you said something terrible, it's that it didn't occur to you to say something accurate, because you never actually looked at what I was doing." Nobody said anything for a while. Then my aunt said, very quietly, "Is that really terrazzo? That floor is gorgeous." And something broke a little. Not fixed, but cracked open enough to let some air in. We ate brunch. It was strange and a little stilted, and my mother cried once, which she would have said was the dust, but wasn't. My dad asked me questions about the restoration plan, real questions, the kind where he actually waited for the answers. Priya asked to see the upper floors. Theo and I walked the second floor together without speaking much, and at one point he stopped at a window that looked out over the street and said, quietly, "It's a really beautiful building." "I know," I said. "I'm not actually mad at you," he said. "I'm not actually mad at you," he said. "But I'm mostly mad at myself for not seeing this coming." "You couldn't have seen it coming," I said. "You didn't know what I do." He looked at me sideways. "Teach me, sometime, if you're willing." It was the most honest thing my brother had ever said to me. I told him yes. My mother left without making a scene, which was its own kind of concession. She hugged me at the door briefly and said, "I want to understand your work better." It was a small sentence. It cost her something. I accepted it. What came after was not smooth. My family is not a family that processes things cleanly or quickly or without several rounds of revisiting. My mother called twice in the following week asking questions that were really arguments. My dad sent me a very long email that was part apology and part explanation of why things had gotten to this point, and it was both accurate and uncomfortable to read. Theo came back to the building with Priya one Saturday and I gave them the real tour, and he was quieter than I'd ever seen him. The kind of quiet that means someone is actually paying attention. The building progressed. The restoration was exactly as complex and deeply satisfying as I'd known it would be. The terrazzo floors came back in sections. A conservator I brought in from Atlanta worked on the lobby plasterwork for 6 weeks. A craftsman I'd found through a colleague spent the better part of a month restoring the brass elevator doors to something close to their original finish, a warm, even tone that made the lobby feel like a document of itself. The local historical society came through in November and formally designated the building as a contributing structure to the downtown historic district. There was a small ceremony. My attorney was there. Mrs. Whitmore Haynes came down from Connecticut. She stood in the lobby and touched the plasterwork with her fingertips and looked like she might cry, and I understood exactly what she was feeling. My mother came too. I had invited her. She stood in the back and didn't say anything until afterward, when she found me by the windows and said, "I used to walk past this building when I was a kid. I always wondered what was inside." "Now you can come see," I said. She nodded. We stood there for a moment. "I told Carol you bought a building," she said. Carol was my aunt. She said I should have known you'd figure something out eventually. It was almost a compliment. From my mother, it was a lot. I moved my studio into the ground floor in January. The light in the mornings is extraordinary. The building settles in ways that make sounds at night. Small creaks and contractions that I've come to understand as the building's own language, the grammar of an old structure that has decided to trust the person living in it. I still drive the Subaru with the cracked mirror. My waiting list is still 18 months long. My brother calls more often than he used to. He asked me last month to look at a building he's working on, an early 20th century warehouse in the next county, and tell him honestly whether there was anything worth saving before he puts in a renovation offer. I went and looked and told him yes, actually the roof trusses and the brick detail on the east facade were worth working around. He thanked me. He listened. Priya and I text sometimes. She asked me to recommend a conservator for a piece of embroidery her grandmother left her, and I did, and the conservator did a beautiful job. And Priya sent me a photo of the finished piece with 3 heart emojis, and I felt unexpectedly like I had a sister. My mother has not once, since that Sunday, called my work a passion project. I noticed. I didn't say anything. I just noticed, and I filed it away, along with the terrazzo floors and the brass doors and the ranunculus on the table that she finally said one day were lovely. Did I want to know a good florist she'd found? I said yes. Some things you don't need to win out loud. Some things you just wait for them to become true. I finally figured things out. There's something I've noticed about the way dismissal works in families. It's rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives in small, polished packages, a word like passionate used where the word capable should have been, a laugh at the wrong moment, a sentence that ends before you do. My mother never once sat me down and said she thought less of my work than my brother's. She didn't have to. The gaps in the conversation said it for her. Every dinner table, every holiday, every time someone new walked through the door and she got to choose how to introduce me. What I understand now, on the other side of all of it, is that the way people describe you in public is the truest measure of how they see you in private. Not what they say when they're apologizing, not what they write in a birthday card. What they say when someone asks a simple question and they have 30 seconds to answer and they think you're not really listening. That's the real thing. That's what I was hearing all those years every time I drove 4 hours for a Sunday dinner and left feeling like I'd been quietly erased. I didn't buy the Whitmore building to punish my mother. I want to be clear about that because it would be a cleaner story if I had, and I'm not interested in clean stories anymore. I bought it because it was right for the building, right for the Whitmore Haynes family, right for the work I'd spent 11 years building quietly while my family narrated a different version of my life to anyone who asked. The confrontation was a consequence, not a plan. The truth has a way of becoming visible eventually, whether you arrange for it or not. I just happened to arrange the room. What I think about most now is not the brunch or my mother's face or even the moment my dad sat down in that dusty chair and looked at the lobby ceiling like he was seeing something he'd missed. What I think about is my brother standing at the second floor window and saying simply, "It's a really beautiful building." Because Theo is not a bad person. He is a person who was handed a framework for what success looks like and never had cause to question it because the framework kept rewarding him. When it stopped, even briefly, he was honest enough to feel it. That matters. It doesn't undo 11 years of Sunday dinners, but it matters. The people who underestimate you are not always your enemies. Sometimes they are just people who built their entire sense of the world before they had enough information and then got comfortable and stopped looking for more. My family loved me in the way that people love things they don't fully see, with warmth and with carelessness at the same time. Changing that required not anger but evidence, not confrontation for its own sake but a room they couldn't look away from, lit by the same morning light that had been falling through those transom windows since 1910. I showed them the building showed them, the building showed them. The things you can't argue someone into understanding, you just have to let them stand in the lobby and look up. I still drive the same car. My waiting list is still 18 months long. The terrazzo floors are finished, and they are extraordinary. I figure I finally figured things out.